Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for a very purposeful conversation with the one and only Joe Jordan. Joe, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's really great to be with you, Don.
Thank you so much. And thanks for being with us. For those of you who I'm meeting for the very first time, my name is Don Carlson, one of the partners with Regal Holdings, and we're delighted to bring Joe Jordan, his positive energy to all of you today. Joe's message, it's a timely one for us. For a number of reasons. One being is that our leadership team has put a lot of energy and resources into our Catalyst for Growth coaching program that is helping advisors increase their quality of life. And that really just ties into Joe's message. We welcome the opportunity to talk to all of you more about that. But for the next hour, we're going to hear from Joe Jordan, who is the author of the award-winning book, Living a Life of Significance. He's won numerous industry awards and he's become a sought-after speaker for companies and conferences everywhere. And in the spirit of the Super Bowl, Joe, coming up on Sunday, I think it's noteworthy to also mention that you were inducted into Fordham's Football Hall of Fame. And today, everyone, Joe is going to inspire and motivate us to be more purposeful in 2025. So, Joe, thanks again for spending time with us today. Take it away.
Well, thanks a lot, Don. I really appreciate it. And the title of my talk is Purpose-Driven Retirement Planning. And I do want to thank you and John for making, this possible. Now, my goal is to take this business from your head to your heart, to give you a different perspective on the importance of what you do. Look, in my career, I've been a life agent. I ran insurance sales at Payne Weber. For those who are too young to know what that was, it was a wirehouse on Wall Street. And I built the annuity business at MetLife and started MetLife's fee-based financial planning program. So I've dealt with a lot of change over the years. So let me tell you what I've learned about change, okay? And what this slide shows is I found that there are three external drivers of change. There's regulation, there's technology, and then there's demographics. And regulations is just something you got to deal with. You just hope it doesn't get too crazy. And for the most part, we've been able to keep our head above water. I remember a number of incidents when they said the business is dead, and it was anything but that. But that's just something you have to deal with. The next one is technology. And technology is what I've seen in the 50 years I've been in the business, okay, is that there's 60s of exponential change. And the first one happens to be digitized. If you digitize something, it means you can manipulate it on a computer. Then it becomes deceptive, which means you don't feel it until it becomes disruptive. And depending upon the business you're in, disruptive might be too late. Then it dematerializes, it demonetizes you, and then it democratized all your stuff. And I guess the best example of that was BlackBerry. I mean, that thing was humming. And then 2008, the phone came out, and over time, it just kind of went away. And if you happen to be in the P&C business, here's a challenge that you face, okay? And this is in the Wall Street Journal. How do you insure a driverless car? So you have this in all industries, but trying to scratch your head to figure that one out is, tends to be problematic. But I would tell you the lesson of this is that the more transactional your business is, the more vulnerable it is to technology change. And property and casualty faces that since many of their products have to be bought. So there's a magazine called Insurance News Net, and it asked the question, which everyone's asking, will ChatGPT or artificial intelligence replace us all? Well, I got to tell you, I don't know about the rest of the world, but I believe that, oh, by the way, you really should get this magazine. I mean, there's always stuff in it that I've always been able to use, and I highly recommend that you do get it. But anyway, most of the people on the planet are concerned that their job is going to go away because of artificial intelligence. Well, let me talk to you about financial advisors. Financial advisors will not be replaced, by AI. What will happen is advisors who use AI will replace the ones who don't. So take that into consideration. Don't be afraid of this thing. Just know that what happens to be is that it happens to be a great tool, and you have to bring it on board. And if you wanted to look at the king of change, there's a guy named Bezos, right? He changed the whole planet. And he says, everyone's asking me what's going to change in the next 10 years. And he said, the real question is what will not change in the next 10 years, because you can build a business model around things that are stable. Now, financial service, when you think of our business, it's really the financial decisions business. And when decisions are complex, or there is a high cost of being wrong, people want another human being to give insight and confidence. So even the 2017 Nobel Prize winner for economics, Richard Thaler, said people don't think rationally when they make financial decisions. And he said this: economics would be a great science if it only dealt with the way people actually behave versus the way that they're supposed to behave. So look, everyone has a long-term perspective until they experience a short-term decline. And here's a good question to ask people, a question like this: Mr. or Mrs. Client or Ms. Client, do you sincerely want to be rich? Or would you rather have a guarantee that you'd never be poor? A lot of times we come out with our jargon, what are your plans and what have you. Most people don't have plans or what have you, but that's a really great penetrating question that would be helpful. See, one of the things I looked at from financial services perspective, there's the left brain and the right brain. The left brain is the analytical part, the right brain is the emotional part. And our industry historically has been driven by a left brain analytical paradigm, that all clients make rational decisions that serve their best interest all the time. No one who has been dealing with the investing public believes that to be true. Plus, the left brain wants to be understood, but the right brain wants to be believed. And I'd rather be believed than understood any day. And David Hume, the famous philosopher from Scotland, said that intellectual awareness and knowledge of something motivates us to do nothing. So let's see what the impact of emotions are, which we don't really discuss all the time. And I love this chart that's there, and it's from Russell Investments, and it illustrates the human emotional responses people go through, a predictable cycle all the way from the idea of going from euphoria to despondency. And you can just know that it works that way all the time. And everybody has a long-term view until they experience a short-term decline. I'm sure you've all experienced this. This leads to the expansion of behavioral finance with champions like Nick Murray, David Thayer, who focus on behavior, not performance or fees. Also, the switch from defined benefit retirement plans to defined contribution plans also expanded the number of people who now have to deal with investing. So just advance to the next slide. And this is what it shows, is the whole idea of most people used to have pensions. Now they don't anymore. So it's the obligation to fund your retirement is now on them. So it's a change for them, okay? So this is Workers with a Pension. And Stoyhall, in his great retirement myth, created this great slide, and Workers with a Pension by Birth. The original retirement pitch was work your butt off, and your retirement will be simply blissful. Also, defined benefit pensions declined. It tied retirement security to market fluctuations. It created a profound societal change. Retirement used to be a guaranteed phase of relaxation and leisure. Now it might be a gamble. So people had to be brought in to the idea of them having to invest. So I think what I'd like to do is to show you something from Nick Murray, and it's called Capital Markets Explained in 5 minutes. And what he did was he said, let's not always use the same type of the wording that we use. And so this next slide shows this concept of the idea of owners versus loaners. And so he created the new vernacular. That was the word I was looking for. for new investors. And since consider ownership versus loanership. Don't call them stocks and bonds, call them ownership and loanership. So stocks have historically, and you all know this, have historically outperformed all the time, just not every day. And the average historical returns on 1/1/1923 through 2023. And you can see if you invested in stocks, you're an owner. And if you invested in bonds, you're a loaner, or CDs or other fixed programs. It would appear that owners get paid twice as much as loaners. Isn't that fair? But you have to take into consideration inflation. And what you see here on this slide is inflation erodes returns, purchasing power goes down, and longer life expectancies may require higher returns. It looks like with inflation, owners get paid 4 times as much as loaners, right? Now, if that's true, why doesn't everybody put all their money into stocks or into ownership? I did the research. I found out, keep it to yourself, that the stock market goes up and down. That's also true of interest rates too. And so I think what people are really afraid of is the bear market. And what I have up here now is the idea of the history of a bear. And so here's the history of all the bear markets from 1957 to present. And it shows the peak, the trough, the peak price, the trough price, the percent loss, and the number of days the bear market was there. So the bear market of 07 to 09 is the real big mama that we've recently experienced, okay? And, you know, think about that. You know, the S&P went down 56%, well, 57%, a decline from 1565 all the way down to 676. Now, you can see why people get panicked. And today, the S&P is where the hell, even with it down, it's still, I think it's over 6,000. But it's really hard for people to live through these periods of time. So this is the value of an advisor and what you do and why you charge a fee. So when somebody starts telling you the client is completely freaked out and just wants to get out, you should say the 3 most important words for this situation. Wait for it. Don't do that. Look, a well-timed intervention can be worth a decade's worth of fees. And don't forget that. Sometimes it's the hardest when the bull market is out. People don't see what you're doing. And they said, look, this was happening regardless of whether you were not there. That's not when you earn your money. You earn your money in situations like that. Now, we will get to demographics. But first, who here on this call wants to live a significant life? Well, if I saw all of you, I know all your hands went up. So what I look at is this idea. I think there's 4 pillars of living a significant life. It's belonging, purpose, storytelling, and transcendence. Belonging. With the secularization of society, the rise of social media, the decline of religion and family values, people have never felt more isolated and alone. Yale did a study and found out the more people use Facebook, the worse they feel. Look, no one posts that the dog died or the car blew up or what have you. And now there's a new phenomenon called FOMO, the fear of missing out. So people tend to put their self-worth predicated on this fear of how many likes they get. And did you know that the UK has the Ministry of Loneliness? This is no joke. This is really something that's out there. This isn't John Cleese doing the Ministry of Silly Walks in Monty Python. There's a real issue here. What I'm trying to do is give you a broader perspective of your business. We're always doing the X's and O's. We're always talking inner tennis. But we got to understand what's going on the outside for us to understand the importance of what we do. Look, it's others that give our lives meaning and purpose by providing community and connection. So isolation is the new smoking. Isolation is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, according to the Surgeon General of the United States. So what happens with people is, especially without the concept of bringing people together, this is a major problem right now. Purpose requires a commitment that's greater than what's in it for you. And I heard a great definition of purpose. I heard it at $1 Million Roundtable, which I'm speaking at, by the way, coming this June. So listen to this. Purpose is not the thing you do. It's what happens inside of others when you do what you do. Notice the emphasis of others. And purpose is different from goals. Goals are things that you want to obtain with an O. You want a bigger house, you want more income, you want status, all of those things, and they're important and you should get them. Purpose are things that you want to attain. The distinction is your eulogy. How do you want to be remembered? Having the biggest house on the block or the best wardrobe? Look, some people think that our purpose in life is to find meaning in life. I don't think that's what we seek. I think what we seek is to experience being alive. And there's no better way to experience being alive than in the service of others. Viktor Frankl, in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, and this guy knows what he talks about. He survived a Nazi concentration camp, said this. He said, significance cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it can only do so as the unintended side effect of one's devotion to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to someone other than oneself. You can't live a significant life unless you benefit others, and you do it for a living. Let me tell you what I think your unique purpose is. Your unique purpose is to make certain that the money outlives the people. That the money outlives the people. So you have to insure against what can go wrong to gain the luxury to invest in what goes right. And now what about your value proposition? The value of your advice and the products you sell are worth far more than what your clients pay for it. Price is only an issue in the absence of value. And let's explore your value. I think you represent intrinsic value. And intrinsic value is not measured by how much money you make, but by the size of the problem that you can solve. And you tell me a profession that solves problems bigger than this. You protect the innocent if someone dies prematurely so that they have peace of mind. You provide people with a worry-free retirement with an income they can't outlive so that they can maintain their independence. You protect that income if they get sick so that they can maintain their dignity. And finally, you provide legacy when they die. Now, you tell me a profession that does more than that. But you got to not only know it, you got to believe it, because your beliefs drive your behavior. And if you drive your behavior, and if your goals don't sync with your beliefs, you'll always manifest your beliefs. And I would submit this: there's a lot of people who get in this business and think of it as a job and don't think it's that much special, you know. But I would submit this is that they can be the suspect to something I know nobody talks about in financial services, and that's low self-esteem. Carter Woodson said, if you can determine what a person thinks, you don't have to worry about what they will do, because if they assume a low position in life, you don't have to urge them to take a low position in life, because they'll get there all by themselves. If you can make someone feel like an outcast, you don't have to ask them to get up and go out the back door. They'll get up and do it on their own. And if there is no back door, their very nature will demand one. All chronic production issues are behavioral, your behavior. So therefore you have to deal with it. I think one of the things we need to fix up is our metrics in our business. And, you know, I have more of a life insurance background, but I was pressing people that they should know. They never knew the face amounts, the amount of insurance that they put in people's hands, or the amount of guaranteed income that they did with some of the annuity products, or long-term care, or any of those benefits. And one of the great things about protection products is the benefit is far is much greater than the premiums that are paid. Assets under management is dollar for dollar. And we had a guy that was a top producer. He was in Pennsylvania, and he was gonna quit. And he finally called me up. He said, Joe, I read your book, and I finally realized that listen to this, if all his clients died last night, the greater Philadelphia area would receive more revenue than the host of the Super Bowl. This was a few years ago, but it was $1.6 billion. He didn't know it. So one of the things to do is to turn around in terms of our attitude, to be thinking about the good and the establishment of what we've done for others. And the next one is storytelling, and all wisdom comes from specific human experiences. Stories create a biological bond, a vicarious experience, which has the ability to change perspective. Stories reduce cynicism because they're true. They actually happen, and stories are memorable. I mean, I can tell you, I've heard people come up to me, heard me speak 12 years ago. They don't remember anything I said, but they remember the stories. Look, people feel first and rationalize later, all right? And don't ask people, what do you think of this, this idea I'm bringing to you? Ask them how they feel about it. Because Einstein said, if you stick to the facts just don't stick. Look, people remember about 6% of what you told them and 100% of how you made them feel. And people don't buy products, as I said before, they buy peace of mind, independence, dignity, and legacy. So this next slide is really important because it's something that I see is going on in the business, and I can't believe it that your group at Regal actually is in the same boat. I think there's a fundamental change going on in financial services, and it's great you're with an organization that's out in front of it. And the idea is purpose-driven retirement planning. Those that retire to something are happier than people that retire from something. And look, some people think retirement will be one pleasurable experience, all right? But one of the astronauts said, if you think going to the moon is hard, try staying home. This is a big deal. And this is a fundamental change. That look, right now, if you have a couple age 62 that doesn't smoke, there's a 50% chance one of them's alive at age 90, 30 years out. We never experienced this before. You know, in the old days, you retired, you took a boat to Ireland, and you were dead at 68, right? When you retired at 65. That isn't the case anymore. And this next slide shows that in 2020, a McKinsey report said this, look, in 10 years, advisors will gradually shed their role as investment managers and become more like integrated life wealth coaches. Now, speaking of coaching, look at this that Regal has done, providing a catalyst for growth, training for wholesalers and for advisors. It's the value add, not just I got the highest commission and I got the lowest price or what have you, and you're going to net more. There has to be value added that they're providing. And coming soon, next slide, a new book from Kevin Burwald and John Kalianis, Mission Retirement, asking questions like, what'll I do with all my time when I retire? What does retirement look like for me? How can I make my retirement more meaningful and fulfilling? Both Kevin and John are authors of an explosion of books that are dealing with this subject. Get on it fast, because this is the type of thing, almost like a technology change. It's out there, it's bubbling up. And I believe it's the future of our business. And so you're blessed to have these guys do it. So let's go through a series of losses when they retire that people have. No one talks about this. They just said it's a wonderful time period, you know? Well, look, people lose identity. They lose routine. They lose relationship. They lose purpose. They lose power. And so some people, even though surrounded by family, can feel totally isolated. They feel useless. They don't feel, and so we don't address that. We said, look, you got a nice retirement. What else do you want out of my life? Well, they want more. And on top of that, what happens is a robot can't do this. And look, this incident I just described there, I see it in my contemporaries, retired for years. Look, I'm 72 and I'm still humping and pumping, but some of these guys are still angry about the promotion they never got, and or the slight that happened, and it might have even happened 10 years ago. And others are out there yelling, "Get off my lawn!" You know, so you don't want to turn into that. This is a full gap, and it's just wonderful to see your guys getting on top of this thing. And there's more. It's like the Ginsu knife. There's more. According to the 2005 Australian longitudinal study, close relationships with children and others, relatives, had very little impact on how long you live. But people with the most friends tend to outlive those with the fewest by 22%. So that means if you lose Regal, you're going to die. It's a little joke, you know. Okay. But anyway, the business is built on two principles, right? Prospecting and everything else. Let me tell you about my manager back in 1974 when I started. He made me commit to what was called a daily contact commitment. That meant that I had to commit to get in touch with X number of people a day. For me, that meant 10. I didn't know I couldn't do it, so I started doing it. Here's what's different about it. You're managing to effort and not results. because you don't control your results. You don't control whether someone sees you. You don't control whether someone buys from you. You don't control interest rates, the stock market, or the Straits of Hormuz. The only thing that you control is your effort. And Gandhi said that true satisfaction doesn't come in the accomplishment, it comes in the effort. Total effort is total victory. So keep that in mind, all right? So we find ourselves in one of two behaviors, prospecting and not prospecting. And what force is out there that makes us avoid prospecting? I can't see or hear you, so I'm going to tell you it's fear. And it's not bad to feel fear, but it's bad to do what fear tells us what to do. I got a little video on fear I'd like to share with you. So if you would play the video, please.
Vence tus miedos, atrévete, cambia. Saga Falabella.
Oh, I wish I knew what it meant, I know what it means. It's dare to try to do something new, okay? Funny thing about fear is that it does not exist in the real world. It's in our minds and it's an emotion. And you don't fight emotion with logic, you fight it with the other major emotion, which I think is love. And 1 John 4 says there is no fear in love. And the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. You just can't be indifferent and be in this business. When you change the way you see things, the things you see change. So now we're going to get to the idea of demographics and what is the defining issue of the 21st century. And a lot of people think it's one of these three. And I don't think it's any of them. I think what it is what the Wall Street Journal article says. Suddenly there aren't enough babies. The whole world is alarmed. Birth rates are falling fast across the countries with economic and social geopolitical consequences. This is a big deal. And I've always been harping on this forever. Global warming is an issue, but it pales in comparison to what's going on in here. Listen to this. In 2017, the UN projected that global populations would peak at 11 billion people in 2100. The new projection is that the peak will be 9.5 billion by 2061. And you know what? It's going to continue to drop. China will get old before it gets rich. It's now estimated that by the end of the century, China will have a population of 500 million, down from 1.6 billion. They have an infrastructure for at least 1 billion people. What are they going to do with that? For the first time since the mid-18th century, China isn't the most populous nation. India is. India just overtook the UK to become the 5th largest economy in the world. The most important variable when projecting economic growth is the size of the working age population. It's simple. When you have a large working age population, more people are saving instead of taking money out. The good news is that in the US, there are still 13,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day till 2030. And the next demographic cohort is the Gen Xers, almost as big as baby boomers. And baby boomers are next. And, the millennials are next, and they're even bigger. Look, your grandchildren are going to be working this market, so you should feel very good about where you are. And this adds up to, this is important, this adds up to a population that will, for the first time in history, be largely responsible for funding their own longer and more costly retirement. Talk about demand, you're in the right place. However, as the population ages, fewer people means less innovation and great pressure on governmental programs. And that's something that we have to deal with. And you know what? It's not just my opinion. Let's hear what Elon Musk has to say about it. Play it, please.
There are not enough people. I can't emphasize this enough. There are not enough people. And I think one of the biggest risks to civilization is the low birth rate and the rapidly declining birth rate. It is, and yet so many people, including smart people, think that there are too many people in the world and think that the population is growing out of control. It's completely the opposite. Please look at the numbers. If people don't have more children, civilization is going to crumble. Mark my words.
I think he has a pretty good handle on the future, don't you? And so that's really what we're beginning to understand, okay? So let me ask you something. Which country, okay, which country has the largest, the most people over age 100? Well, guess what, gang? It happens to be the United States. Most people think it's Japan, but Japan has more per capita, as you see. But that's a population that's totally disappearing, as is South Korea. So this is a this is a real big issue. And so the point is the United States has to take the lead to deal with this longevity thing, okay? And that's a big problem. This comes from Professor Moshe Milevsky. He's a great guy up in Toronto, and you know those happen to be the facts, okay? And that's a major problem. The other thing is women versus men. For every guy over 100 in the United States, there's 5.5 women. So longevity, excuse me, is really a women's issue. The other thing is look, 80% of men die married, 80% of women die single. So life insurance also is a women's issue. So that's why I'm a big advocate of trying to get as many women into this business as possible. So what are the new challenges that people face, okay? And they get a bag of cash and they have to retire from it. So what happens is they have to manage risk and not just money. They got to make the most of what they got and turn assets into income. They don't have a clue of doing it. So there's now also a consumer change of focus. And that focus is ROI used to mean return on investment. Now it's the reliability of the income. The whole idea of the amount of assets you have dictates your wealth measurement is relatively new, and I'll prove it to you. You guys know Jane Austen. She was in the early 1800s. She wrote about English society, and she had a book, Pride and Prejudice. And Mr. Darcy, who was the fabulously wealthy guy there, she didn't describe that he had £1 million. She said he got 10,000 a year. The historical perspective on wealth has always been the amount of the income. So what is the biggest asset that the average American has? The average American has, okay, of these four? Well, it happens to be Social Security by a mile. And again, I'm talking the average person. So this particular person has a decision to make. Do they take their Social Security at 62 or do they take it at 67? This person decided to take it at age 62. And he or she gets $18,000 a year. Just by waiting, they can get substantially more. They can get $28,000 waiting to their normal retirement age. By the way, if they waited to age 70, they get 76% more. So that's a major issue. But the real question to ask here is this: how much would an individual have to save on their own to give them $18,000 a year, increasing by 3% a year for inflation? Don't ask me. Fidelity says this: if you multiply the income number by 25, you come up with the number, and that number happens to be $450,000. Now, where are you going to get someone of modest means to understand that $18,000 is tough to live on? They know that, but they didn't realize that that's what it was worth. If they waited to age 67 and you multiply 28, it's 701. You get this dramatic increase in the amount of income that you get. So I think that's important. Okay. So that's why I'm saying delay Social Security if you can to age 70, you get 76% more. And so how does that happen? How do they know, and how can they pay older people more? Well, it's done by actuaries, and actuaries know how many people are going to die in a given cohort. They don't know who, but they know how. They know how many, excuse me. They also know that the number of deaths will accelerate as people age. Over time, there will be less people receiving the payouts. I mean, that's simply how it works. So if you start at age 65 with 100 people, okay, by age 80, you still have 63 people, but you're not paying all of those other people. So it's the idea of a mortality credit, which means the people who die pay for the people who live. And that's the way Social Security is. It's just a big immediate annuity. Also, it's a non-correlated asset, meaning that it's less affected by the capital markets. Look, all insurance products transfer real risks. They transfer it from a person to the insurance company, right? Now, let's go through the risks that people face when they go forward, okay? And there's a longevity risk of living too long. So delaying Social Security might be very helpful. If possible, go to age 70 and wind up with 76% more, from 62 anyway. Market and interest rate volatility. Remember that study I saw? The stock market goes up and down, so do interest rates. So the strategy of people buying a CD and living off the interest certainly hasn't worked over the past couple of years. Then they don't know how much money to take out, or withdrawal rate risks. How much do I take out? I don't know how long I'm going to live. It's a big issue. There's one called the sequence of returns, which I'll deal with later. And then there's purchasing power risk. Even in relatively modest inflationary periods, the longer someone lives, the more their purchasing power decreases. And then there's health risks, of course. So that's what a lot of older people face these days. So here's some of the issues they face, okay? There's an article in the Wall Street Journal that says, forget the 4% rule. When I first saw this, I was surprised that the Monte Carlo scenario said that if you take out 4% from a 60-40 portfolio, you have a 90% probability of not running out of money. Well, guess what? That's a 10% probability you're going to run out of money. And you're not going to get on a plane to fly to Vegas having a 10% probability of not getting there, would you? 3% is now the new withdrawal rate, according to Wade Fowler, professor at the American College. And I'm pleased to tell you that I'm on the board of the American College. So that means $1 million would generate $40,000 of income, and now it goes down to 3, it's 30,000. That's a real wake-up call, okay? The other part is this idea of the sequence of returns, which I told you I would get to. This is Moshe Milevsky, and so what he says is this: when you switch from accumulated money to withdrawing money, you have to understand that it is completely different. So what he did was he just created these two portfolios. They're artificial, of course, and every 3 years they go through the same cycle. One has the bad year in the third, the other one has the bad year in the second year. So just by this, they're exactly equal. They grow at 8%. However, if they take out income, what starts to happen is this, is the one that has the bad year later on lasts 30 years, the other one only lasts 25 years. And what happens if you live beyond 90? So this is a whole new risk that's associated with this longevity risk that happens to be there. And so that's an issue, okay? So benefits of a buffer asset. It's this next slide. And this came to us from Barry Sachs, and he looked at an actual event starting in 1990, going 30 years out to 2019. Now, again, as I said, a couple age 62 that doesn't smoke, there's a 50% chance one of them's still alive at 30 years out. And married people live long too, okay? You know why? I have absolutely no idea why, but you know, they do, okay? So it's the 30-year horizon, as I said. So that's important. So what he did is he put $750,000 into into the S&P totally, no 60-40 portfolio for them. They were pulling out 6% as an annual rate, not 4, not 3, but 6. And so what he did is he just looked at what would have happened had they done that, and they're taking out 6.15%, as I said. If they did nothing, and just lived with those performance, and by the way, I think there were, I forget that there were a number of, there was 9 negative years, and the balance were positive years. Okay, so what happened is you see that colorful line to 2019. What he said is that if they did nothing, and they just kept, oh, by the way, they increased the income by 3% a year. They ran out of money, and they're gone. And you know, think about that. Okay, it's not like they wake up Wednesday and said we're out of money. No, they saw it coming 5 years earlier, and then they start curtailing their standard of living. You know, they drink Glenn McGregor instead of Johnny Walker Black. You know, stuff like that. So, oh, it was 21 positive years and 9 negative years. That's what it was. Okay. So anyway, they're out of money, and the idea is, again, that presses on the human side, not the numbers, is the fact that they see that coming. Now, what he also did is he looked at using a buffer asset. And I'll get to what a buffer asset is later, but essentially it's a bag of cash. It's somewhere where you've got money that you could use when the portfolio goes down dramatically. So what he looked at was that in early years, the year 95 and the year 2003, if they replace the income from another source, then what you see is that yellow line is, instead of being out of money from starting from 750, they have $550,000 less. And if they skip 2 years in the later period, 2009 and 2016, it's 350,000. So the idea of using a buffer asset is something that's there. So you know what types of buffer assets are there? Okay, and next slide. Okay, purchasing power declines as you get hit with inflation. So that's important. So what I want to show you is in 1995, the stamps. This is 30 years ago of this year. Stamps cost 32 cents, and the S&P closed at 459. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, what you see is this: is that the S&P 500, rather, stamps cost 73 cents, so it's up 2.5 times. But the S&P closed at $5,800. Now it's even greater. So the fact of the matter is that they were invested in the S&P this whole time on an accumulation phase. You know, they'd be doing great. But the fact of the matter is people have problems dealing with that up and down, the volatility. So there's 3 types of buffer assets. Set aside 2 or 3 years of expenses in a liquid money market account to be able to use. So, you know, when you think about it, that's a pretty big hunk out, and it's sitting in an account. If it was just a couple of years ago, it wouldn't be getting any interest. So it takes it down. It's a high opportunity cost. And the other part of it is it has to be repaid. You can use loans, preferably from a non-MEC properly funded life insurance policy or LIRP. And this comes from David, his name popped out of my head. It'll kill me. But he wrote a book called The Power of Zero. That's the name of the book. And so it's another use of life insurance to buy these heavy cash value life insurance policies that you have the ability to borrow money out during those down periods, and it comes out tax-free. And guess what? You really don't have to pay it back. It reduces the death benefit. And the other thing is this idea is reverse mortgages. Look, I used to raise garlic and a crucifix every time I heard about this stuff. But the fact of the matter is there's something like $12 trillion tied up in real estate for people over 65. And they've watched that value go up dramatically. And the fact of the matter is they've really cleaned it up. They can't throw the people out. They don't have to replace the money. It gets paid off at the time that they sell the house. So it's really critical that people. And you know what's great about it? It's not just for the rich people. Some guy bought a house for $30,000 30 years ago. Now it's worth $450,000. He has access to money that he never had before. the ability to improve his standard of living, to maybe do repairs that he couldn't do before. Or it's this idea in terms of protecting the nest egg that he worked so hard to get. So that's something that's really important. If I were you, really know about it, because I think the future is going to contain people using home equity as part of their retirement plan, okay? So this slide shows you what happens with our progressive income tax system. The more money you make, the more you pay. That's just the way it is, okay? And so, as I said, as your taxable money increases, your taxes increase. But your Social Security benefits, if you're retired, are reduced, okay? Primarily through something called IRMA, Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. And Medicare is now means tested, meaning that the more you make, more your Social Security check will be docked simply to pay for Medicare premiums, and then some. So what you're looking here is the idea of the rules have changed. So this just gives you an idea of what those premiums are now, and that will continue to increase. So more and more of your Social Security, you know, it's not like this phony thing that you saw from Joe Namath, you know, we can get ways to get your Social Security back. You got to live in a box on the street, you know, to be able to get this. But this is legitimate. This is the idea of if you can reduce your taxable income, you could wind up getting more out of your Social Security. So what accounts are tax-free or are not considered taxable? Health savings accounts, Roth accounts, reverse mortgages, and loans from certain types of life insurance policies. Okay, so that's important to know. So the future will include home equity, as I said before, increasing asset diversity and reduces retirement risk. So, and I said properly funded life insurance policies. I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, okay? And those can lower IRMA levels and could also be used. So think about this. They could also be used to be a bridge for Social Security. Someone hits age 62. Guess what? If they have access to this type of account, they could perhaps use that income and allow Social Security to build. And that's something that's important. So it's using a buffer asset in that way, okay? The other thing that's there is the Secure Act elevated life insurance to become the premier wealth transfer product and downgraded stretch IRAs, all retirement products, including Roth accounts, because now they have to be paid out over a 10-year period, whereas before they didn't have that, okay? So it's really the demise of the stretch IRA. Prior to 2020, beneficiaries who inherited an IRA could take RMDs based on their own life expectancy. If they were young, it was de minimis. Well, that's all gone now, you know? So you have to think about it. Remember, I did other research too. I found out everyone dies, okay? So the Secure Act, as I said, eliminated that issue because now the accounts have to be paid out over a 10-year period. So if they get a life insurance death benefit, that happens to be tax-free. So just something to be thinking about, okay? So I think that's important for you to take a look at. The other thing that's important is, did you look at the standard deduction that we currently have? You know, you might have noticed that a lot of people don't itemize their deductions anymore because of the generous nature of the standard deduction. It's $30,000, but if you happen to be over 65, it's $33,000. Substantial tax cut, especially at the lower levels. What this other slide shows is the current marginal and effective tax rate. This is real gold if you look at it. Current marginal and effective tax rates, all right? The marginal rates versus the effective rates, okay? And the thing that I think is really remarkable is to take a look at the idea that when you get to 20%, okay, this year, because remember, this goes away at the end of the year if they don't you know, get them to be renewed, and who knows if that could happen. But this year, this calendar year, $427,000 is taxed at a federal rate of 20%. That is just huge. just huge. And so if you've got a modest, a person that doesn't have a lot of money, maybe has $150,000 a year income, but has $250,000 in a 401k, maybe take some of that money out, pay taxes at 20%, and turn it into a tax-free vehicle. It's a great way to do that. So, think about the effective tax rate, as I said, at 20%, $427,000. And these rates expire at the end of, by January 2026. And so what do you think in the long run is going to happen with tax rates? Think they're going to go up? You think they're going to go down? Of course, they're going to probably go up. And you remember, when people have a 401k, they have a partner, and it's called Uncle Sam. And he takes a piece of it, and he can arbitrarily change that any day. The other thing is the idea, this other risk we talked about was the odds, okay, that people face. And it's the next slide. The odds for your house burning down or getting blown up, unless you're in California, is about 3%. Okay, having your car get destroyed or blown up, it's about 18%. But long-term care is a possibility of an incident at 72%. So those are some things you should know. But I do like to end with some stories, and I have a story coming up, and so it's the next slide. You can advance it, Loretta. Okay. I saw this article, How to Protect Yourself from Your Parents, and I took exception to this because my mother was in a hospital bed in an apartment in Manhattan with 2 kids. So of course I'd take care of my mother. But I'm married to a saint, and it didn't bother her that much, and she was even behind it. But that doesn't always happen. And sometimes that can create great angst in the fact that one spouse is not tickled pink that they're spending time, effort, and money taking care of the other parent. And this is growing exponentially, again, as people live longer. All of the press on this subject comes from people like me, baby boomers who took care of children and parents at the same time. Has anyone given any consideration to the person whom this is happening to? I've got a video that goes through this. If you would play it, please.
I know what's going on here. I wish you'd just say it. You don't really want me to live with you. Your house really is too small. I'm sure the money's tight. Besides, I'm his mother, not yours. You probably think this isn't your responsibility. Yes, I can see it on your face. You wish someone else was stuck with me. That would be more convenient for you, wouldn't it?
My mother died October 19th, 1987 at 4:02 p.m. For those of you who know or have been around for a while, she took the market with her. Way to go, Mom, okay? But I didn't see this video until the 1990s, and I had no idea that perhaps my mother could have had a similar sentiments, feeling that she was a burden on her family. But more on this later. What I want to show you is, I want you to meet a guy named Fred Bellman, okay? And Fred is at $1 Million Round Table. He's got that stupid hat on because he happens to be a volunteer. And I was asking him, what happened with your, there was a big, he's from Lebanon. That's what I'm trying to spit it out. He's from Lebanon. There was a massive explosion in 2020 in Lebanon. It killed a lot of people, and it took out a part of the city. And I said to him, I said, Fred, were you involved in it? He says, no. But one of my clients jumped in front of his wife, and a charter glass came in and took his neck out, and he was dying. The guy is dying. And you know what his last words was to his wife before he left this planet? He said, talk to Fred, he'll take care of you. Talk to Fred, he'll take care of you. So I'm just urging you, tell me a human experience that could be as intimate as that. I mean, that's one of the great things about being able to sell or selling life insurance, because we know death is certain. And so what happened here is, tell me another profession that would allow someone to have such an intimate connection, I said, with another person, okay? Oprah Winfrey didn't show up explaining his merits, and no TV ad paying homage to him. It's just another day at the office. And that's why I think he's a superhero, and all of you in financial services are superheroes. That's the idea of living a significant life, that you do some great stuff, and I wish you would find ways that you could reinforce that every day. Okay. And I know sometimes this grinds on you, and people, I don't know, I don't get respected as much as I would like to, and maybe if I was a doctor would be great, wouldn't it? Well, doctors always fail because everyone dies. But Fred's client's legacy will live on. And so I just think that's something that's really important. I want you to make certain that you build out your entire practice, that you do all of the products that they fail. And look, I would take this over, no one on their deathbed says, call my broker. I'm really pleased that she beat the S&P by 6 basis points, But knowing that there could be a death benefit, that could help the family, I think that's really just, particularly spectacular. Okay. What I'd like to do is, I want to end with a personal story. And this happens to be Harry Truman, and he's receiving the 1948 nomination for president, the Democratic president. This was in, I forget where it was. Now you see there's a guy sitting behind him. His hand is up near his chin, and he's pretty predominant. And that happens to be my father. My father was an advisor to Harry Truman. And so, he was a dude. And Harry, what happened is so let's get to the next slide. This is my mother. That's my sister Peggy at the left, and Sister Marie on the right. My brother came later, and I came in 1951. I think my mother thought she's being pretty good shape. She's pretty well connected. We had 3 homes. A lot of the family had money, and she'd go to the White House for tea and stuff like that. It was pretty cool. Well, it wasn't that cool, because what happened is my father got killed in a car accident. And guess what he did? He got killed 6 months after he canceled a $100,000 New York life policy to buy an apartment building in the Bronx, and he was killed. And so my mother woke up with 4 kids, and I'm 6 months old, and Marie is 12, and she has to take care of us. And it was hard. She didn't have a college degree. She came from, she was going to be a housewife, and she had to take care of us. And that was a major issue that happened with her. And she had no skills, no college. She finally got a job as a secretary in the bartenders local. Not exactly going to the White House for tea, is it? Okay. And our situation was dramatically changed as a result of that one decision. And in the 1950s, the Bronx where we lived was really great, but it wasn't so great in the 1970s, okay? The worst decision my mother had to make was, you see the 2 girls, neither one of them went to college at the appropriate age, because my mother determined the girls had to go to work to make sure the boys went to college. How do you like that decision, life is not about the math, okay? It's about the consequences of the decision. And my mother died October 19th, 1987, as I said. And in fact, we just celebrated, as I said before, the 37th anniversary of the stock market crash that happened, okay? But I did see that my mother-in-law video as I said, that I had just recently seen that. So that was something that spurred me on. But what happened is I wound up getting into the insurance business, and I did that not because of this situation, it was because there was a guy who used to play for the New York Giants, and that was my other religion, if you would. And by the way, I'm in the Hall of Fame with Vince Lombardi, me and Vince, yeah. But anyway, it wasn't until I was 54 years age and I was going to speak at the MDRT main platform, and I began to think about what $100,000. Do you know what $100,000 was in 1952? Do you know? Okay, you could buy a kick-ass house, right, for like $8,000. You'd probably sell it for $250,000 in the 80s. Our lives would have been radically different. My sisters would have gone to school, and what happened was it really unsettled me. And what happened for the first time, I had to wait till I was 54 for me to wake up about this impact on the family. You see, it's not about the math. As I said, it's about the consequences of the decision. So I got mad. Rather than describe how mad I was, listen to me. I'm the opening speaker, $1 Million Roundtable, 20,000 people from around the world. Listen to what I sounded like.
And I want to know, where was the person of significance, the advocate who could have taken my father, even pushed him up against the wall and said, don't you understand you have to have life insurance because I'm advocating for your wife, because if you're gone, life could be miserable. Where was the advocate who advocated for my sisters who were denied a college education at the appropriate time? And where was the advocate even for my father, whose youngest son stands in front of you now? And the only legacy I can tell you my father left us was he left us alone.
Now, could you imagine being in front of 20,000 people talking about the father you never knew, sounding like that? Well, I'm over it now. And let me tell you some of the things that helped me get over it, okay? This next slide shows a guy, Joseph Campbell. It's a book. It's called The Hero's Journey. Joseph Campbell was the premier mythologist in the United States. And what he did is explored all myths, all societies and religions going back to before Christ was born. And one of the things he said was that he discovered that all mythical stories from all cultures, from all time, are really one story, and it's the hero story. He's the guy behind Star Wars, by the way. They used him and some of his background to create that. And in this book, which I urge you to get, was he introduced me to a guy named Chief Seattle, which is the next slide. And the city's named after him. And in 1854, the federal government's throwing this guy off his land. He's about to lose everything. And listen to what he said. And imagine if you had this frame of mind of knowing what your role is in life. He said, we just got word from your president back in Washington that he's going to buy our land. But how can you buy and sell the sky? The land, the idea is strange to us. All parts of this earth are sacred to my people. Holy is the images in terms of all of the forest and the trees and everything else. Okay, your destiny is a mystery to us. What will happen when all of the buffalo are slaughtered? What will happen when all of the secret corners of the forest are heavy with the scent of many men, and the view of the ripe hills is blotted by talking wires? It's the end of living and the beginning of survival. When the last red man in his wilderness is gone and his memory is that of a cloud going over the prairie, will there be any memory of my people left? We love this land like a newborn loved its mother's heartbeat. So if you buy our land, love it as we have loved it. Care for it as we have cared for it. Hold in your mind the memory of the land when you receive it, and preserve it for all children. Love the land the way God loves you, because this we know, no man, be he red man or white man, can stand alone, because we're brothers after all. Now, can you imagine someone who looked like me back then thought this guy was a savage? I was driving in a car when I had this on a radio. I had to pull over because it really absolutely changed my life. It really talked about the idea of what life is all about. And I think this is it. Know where you came from, stewardship when you're here, legacy when you're gone. And that's what you guys do in financial services. So I just wanted to share that with you. But I'll tell you the best thing that happened, the best thing. I happen to be Irish, and my mother always wanted to go home to Ireland, but she never made it. But in 2004, 2006, excuse me, I spoke in Dublin and I showed her image. And in my mind, I took her home. Thanks.
Joe, thank you so much to learn from your experiences, perspective, and also where you see the industry going, I think is important. You know, the Super Bowl, I referenced it in the intro. It's coming up on Sunday. We're going to hear a lot about two coaches, Andy Reid, Nick Sirianni, but I don't know if you know this, the average football team, NFL team, has over 20 coaches. Why is that? Coaching's important. So I think all of us advisors need time to find a coach, hear ideas like this, but also to look at what you do every day a little bit differently, just not as a financial coach, but a life coach as well, and talk about the things that are really important for retirees or those that are planning for retirement. You know, have significance, continue to have purpose, and continue to make an impact. And those people have a very happy retirement. So we appreciate your time today. Thanks again, Joe, for joining us and your insight. Hope the rest of you have a great day and a fantastic 2025.
Thank you.